This is the Professional Hypnotherapist Podcast, session number 002. Ian Epstein on the Hypnoband, couples counselling, good stress, bad stress, and lots more. Welcome to the Professional Hypnotherapist Podcast, a production of the European Association of Professional Hypnotherapists. That's eaph.ie. And yes, a very warm welcome to you to the Professional Hypnotherapist Podcast. I'm your host, Aidan Noon. So before we get started, I want you just to use your imagination and imagine for me discovering how you too can begin using the creative capacity of your mind to tap into a well of resources that you did not know exists within you. Start by learning to take action now, because this learning can truly help you to create success, whatever success means to you, because all our hypnotherapist members are registered and certified and are eagerly waiting to hear from you. Just take a look at eaph.ie. And now over to Ian Epstein. And our guest today is Ian Epstein, who is a hypnotherapist in Dublin, Ireland. And Ian, thank you for being a guest today on our podcast.
You're very welcome, Aidan. Thank you for inviting me.
Excellent, thank you. And Ian, in these COVID times, how do you find that things are panning out for you in terms of the work that you do?
Well, approximately 2 years ago, I started using Zoom because we couldn't see clients face to face. And I started using Zoom and found it a very, very good way of seeing people, because you can't do therapy really without seeing somebody face to face. And Zoom has proved to be a very good platform for that.
Okay.
And since using Zoom, it's going to be very difficult to go back to seeing people face to face, because it's such a comfortable way for them to be in their own home, and it just works. Simple as that.
In terms of getting used to using online work, online therapy, how did you find how you adapted to that?
I adapted to it quite well because I have my office is at home, so I don't have to go out anywhere to get to my office as such. And I downloaded a private Zoom account, and that's what I use, and I find it very easy to use, and I find it that I adapted to it very quickly.
And in terms of the clients, how have they adapted? Or when you say to them, "Look, I'm going to do online therapy with you," what's their reaction or response?
Action is great because they feel that they don't have to travel. You can see people all over Ireland and further afield if necessary. And they don't have, as I say, they don't have to travel, and they can see you from the comfort of their own homes, which is important as well for them to be comfortable.
Now, Ian, I always ask, all our guests are asked this question. Just tell us something about you that not many people know.
Very little about me that people don't know at this stage, Aidan. I'm 66. I'm 23 years doing therapy, and I started way back then. I qualified doing therapy or with hypnotherapy with Joe Keeney, and I went into private practice straight away. And I've always loved helping people. Literally from the time I was a scout leader, I used to love helping kids. And one kid in particular came to me in Scouts, and his dad said, "Can you help him?" And I said, "What's the problem?" And he came in and he was like Kenny from South Park, where he had his hood up and right down over his face. And I just said, "Leave him there." And we'll see what
Yeah.
happens. And over the weeks, he started to put the hood open more, and we were playing what's called floorball one night, and he
Mm.
really took an interest in it. And I went over to him and
Mm.
I said, "Would you like to try it?" And he did. That same guy nowadays is living on his own in London, and he is a working with an art place where he's developing things for television and cinema, etc. And totally different person. He went from being introvert
Mm.
nearly to extrovert. And
Mm.
ever since then, I've always wanted to
Mm.
help people.
And when you mention that, Ian, what conjures up in my mind is the, the bud on a plant as it grows and develops and opens up and fully blooms. There's almost that metaphorical nature of that being fully blooming and blossoming.
Absolutely well said. Couldn't have put it better
Mm.
myself. And it's lovely to see when you're working with clients, and to use your terminology there, is that when you first see them and they might be down or depressed, or they may be feeling not where they want to be, and when you start working with them, you start seeing that little glimmer of light coming back into their
Hmm.
eye, and the clouds starting to move, and they're becoming to where they want to be. And at the end of it, they're kind of saying, wow, I couldn't believe that I'm back to my normal self
Hmm.
again, which is a fantastic feeling for
Hmm.
them. But equally, it's a fantastic feeling for yourself, knowing that you've helped that person to get
Yeah.
there.
And your whole outlook in terms, as you mentioned, you like helping people. And that seems
Hmm.
to have gone right back into childhood or a younger adult than you are now. Yeah.
Well, I always had this thing of doing things for people. Years ago, I was a disc jockey, believe it or
Uh-huh.
not. Then when I left school, I became a photographer, and I was a press photographer for quite a while, working with the Irish press and doing PR work. And I saw a trend changing in the photographic world where cameras were being moved over to digital.
Mm.
And I said to myself, this is going to kill completely the photographers. And it did, because the likes of newspapers said they would never take pictures from the likes of mobile
Yeah.
phones. Now they'll take pictures from anywhere. And I've got friends of mine still who are photographers, and they are really, really struggling.
Mm.
And I, at that stage, went back to studying. And at the time, my wife went back to college. She was doing horticulture. My daughter was doing her leaving. My son was doing his intercert. And it was a very quiet household that year.
Yeah.
And we all started going back and doing the studying.
Hmm.
And I loved every
Hmm.
minute of it.
Excellent. So basically, it's sort of what you did was in terms of studying hypnotherapy and therapy, it was merely a formalization of what you have been doing for many years before that.
Correct. I was never, I've got to be honest, I was never brilliant in school, because I was never one of these that like to conform to, you have to do this and you have to do
Hmm.
that. And it was only when I went to study hypnotherapy and therapy that I realized that I could eat, sleep, and drink it, because it was something I wanted to
Mm.
do.
So how much of a rebel are you?
A rebel. That's a very good question. I wouldn't say that I'm a rebel, but as I said, I just ate, drank, and slept therapy. And to this day, like, I'm always learning. And the biggest people that can teach you is your clients.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
And
Excellent.
with all the teachers that I had, with all the therapies that I've learned and have been taught, the biggest teachers have been my clients.
And what is it about hypnosis that appeals to you and hypnotherapy that appeals to you?
I think because it is a way of relaxing the client, that no other therapy really does that, as far as I'm aware. And when you think about counselling or CBT or any of these other therapies, of which there's quite a lot of, hypnotherapy is the only one that gets the client to relax into the therapy. And I think they really enjoy it. And when I see a person relaxing and whatever their problem is, because they're relaxing, you're able to do therapy a lot better with them and they get to where they want to be a lot faster.
So there's an acceleration process.
Yes, without doubt. And the beauty of it is the client feels relaxed from day one, where I don't think any other therapy can do that for them. And it's lovely to see somebody being able to just go from being really nervous or really feeling of overwhelming doom to be able to sit with their head back and just be able to relax. And when they come out or they come back from it, they say to me, "My God, Ian, I can't believe how relaxed that was." Even if they learn nothing else, the relaxation of hypnotherapy is superb.
Yeah. So why choose hypnotherapy as opposed to other therapies available?
I'm going to knock a couple of therapies here by answering that. Counselling, for example, is great. I'm not knocking it because what we do as therapists really is counselling. It's one to one or maybe one to two, but normally it's one to one. With counselling, when people come to me who have been to counselling, they have always said to me, "Oh, I've been in counselling for maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years, and longer." And I'll say, "Hold on a second. You've become a friend of the therapist. You're becoming their little bank balance to help them." That is ridiculous because they're not giving you the answer that you want. What they're doing is they're giving you suggestions, they're giving you this, that, and the other, and they're leaving it up to you to find the answer, which is to me unfair. And
Right.
the counselling end of things. Now, please, I think counselling is fantastic. Some of my colleagues are counsellors and they're brilliant, but I don't think counselling gets the client to where they want to be.
Okay. And how does the client get to where they want to be? Is it not within themselves?
It is within themselves, of course, but it's the way that you're dealing with it. And as a hypnotherapist, you usually see people for depending on what it is, could be 4, 5, 6 sessions, could be 10 sessions, but there's always an ending to it. Whereas even if it does go to 10 sessions, for example, I will always say to the client, "Now let's take a break for a couple of months and see how you're doing." They can always ring me,
Okay.
but for someone to go for therapy and they've been telling me, "Oh, I've been in counseling for 4 or 5 years," it doesn't work. That doesn't bode well with myself.
Okay. Now, you have a number of specialities, and perhaps you just start off by telling us what your first speciality is.
About 7 years ago, I was being asked a lot about doing weight loss for people. And going back to 2010, I spoke to people in Scotland who developed this therapy called the Hypnoband. And it's the Hypnoband
Okay.
weight loss system. And
Okay.
it's a brilliant, brilliant system for losing weight because it's not a diet. Diets don't work. Diets, I won't say they can't work, but they don't work. And the reason why they don't really work is because the mind is going, "Oh, we're having a change. And that's okay, I'm fine. And, we're having a change in eating patterns. That's okay." And then suddenly, after a week or two, it'll go, "Hold on a second. Where's all my favorite foods gone? Are you trying to starve me?" And therefore, it'll kick you off the diet.
Okay.
And with
Now,
with the sorry for cutting across you, the Hypnoband is
no,
six
no, no.
sessions,
Okay.
and it, as I say, works extremely well. And I've seen people from 30 stone down to a half stone overweight. They're usually brides that want to get into their wedding dresses.
That's a huge transformation,
It
Ian, isn't
is.
it?
I mean, I still remember one of my very first clients, as I said, he was 30 stone. He came from Cork. He was going to have the actual gastric band done in one of the big clinics. And when he went there, they said, sorry, you're too big for the gastric band. We have to do a full bypass. And they wanted astronomical amount of money. And he says, I'm sorry, I can't afford that. He went back down to Cork to his doctor. His doctor looked around and got in touch with me. And he got a train from Cork, taxi to here, to where I am now in Barton Road East in Dundrum. And he started losing weight. I think he's down to around about 18 stone now. But the real kick with that was the last time he came to me, he was standing at the front door when I went to open it, and there was tears going down the guy's face. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, look, I'm wearing trousers for the first time instead of sweatpants. And, that is a brilliant feeling, not only for him, but for me to help him. And the Hypnoband, it shows you where your weaknesses are. I don't do any therapies with anybody unless I've done it myself. I did the Hypnoband myself. I don't drink myself, but I was a Coke-aholic. I could drink 3 liters of Coke a day. I have never touched Coke since. That's Coca-Cola, by the way. And
lots of sugar there.
Exactly. And I lost weight. I couldn't believe it. So it's a brilliant form of losing weight, and it's a very simple form of losing weight. It's having the gastric band exactly the same as if you're going into the hospital, but it's all done through the mind.
Okay, well, that's what I was going to ask you. For those of us who don't know anything about Hypnoband, it's a sort of like a virtual thing. It's a mind Hypnoband. Yes. It's not actually, you don't actually perform surgery.
No, but you are actually performing the surgery within the Hypnoband through the mind. And people have said to me, because there's the sound effects of being in the surgery, there's the sound effects of being with your doctor and specialist, and it works fantastic. And people, when they have finished, or even you can start losing weight from the first session. And I've had clients recommending other clients to me all the time, saying it's brilliant. They can't believe it worked. And it's it's less than a fraction of the cost of what it is to go into one of the clinics to have the gastric band done. And less pain.
Of course.
And less pain.
Absolutely. And I was going to say the recovery time is
immediate.
Zero. Excellent. So what would you say into, a prospective client out there, or anybody listening who may have an issue with weight and weight management in terms of achieving a target weight? What would you say to them in terms of how would you apply what they're going through in terms of match that with your Hypnoband? What would you say?
First thing I would say to anybody who is going through that is to get rid of the weighing scales. The weighing scales are the biggest curse in losing weight, because you're hopping on and off the scales every day, sometimes twice a day, to see what you've lost. And okay, remember, with a diet, the first stone nearly that you lose is water, because we're nearly 90% water, and that's what you lose. With the Hypnoband, it's not water that you lose. The body becomes adapted to not using what it's used to using. For example, if your weakness is alcohol, it'll show you that it's alcohol. If your weakness is cream cakes, it'll show you. And the thing is, I say to people, if you have a weighing scales in your house, get rid of it. And note when your dress size or your jacket size or your trouser size starts to go down an inch each month week, whatever the case may be. And that's the way it works. And that's when they say, wow. And people, they see a difference in them, and they see you're looking fantastic, and how did you lose the weight? And as I say, diets don't work because you get people who are on eternal diets, and they don't know why they're not
Yeah,
losing weight.
absolutely. So, Hypnoband, and that's one to remember. Again, just to recap, how does it work? How many sessions, or what does a prospective client need to do now if they're interested?
Okay. When somebody rings me about the Hypnoband, I will explain to them that it's 6 sessions. The first session is the getting to know you session, where we go through a complete questionnaire of who, what, why, where, and when. And as I said, the Hypnoband is a way of life. It's a life-changing way of living. And we go through that questionnaire, and they sign an agreement to do it. Then the second session is meeting your surgeon and your anaesthetist, exactly the same as what you would do if you went into a clinic. And then
Interesting.
the third session is the actual operation. The fourth session is whether you need to loosen or tighten the band. The fifth session is just to make sure everything is okay. And then really the sixth session is a backup or a free session, because what I do there is I get them to go back and remember when they were younger. In other words, for them to search through their mind the way we were taught as kids, uh, don't leave anything on your plate because the poor Biafran babies are starving. And, nowadays, if there's an extra potato on your plate, if you give it to someone else, if you give it to the dog or you put it in the bin, it's going to be waste anyway. And waste is waste. But the one thing that I'll give people a little insight into this, and I give people hints and tips as they go along, which are very beneficial. One, for example, is I say to them, I want you to get 3 golf balls. And that really confuses people, because
Well, tell us about
what
that.
you're doing is you're bringing the size of the stomach, which I show them as a rugby ball, down to the size of a tennis ball, and then down to the size of a golf ball. So if you have, in other words, the top of your stomach has a band put round it, which is the gastric band, and that part is known as what's called the stoma. It then is going to be filled, and that's it. You're not filling the whole rugby ball. Why I asked them to get 3 golf balls is I asked them to put one in the fridge, one in the handbag or in the car, if it's men don't normally carry handbags, and one in the goodie drawer. And it's a reminder to say or to show them that their stomach is now the size of a golf ball.
Well, that sounds like good advice.
The other thing I do is I say to people, stop using regular dinner plates. In other words, we have dinner plates, we have mid-sized plates, and we have side plates. I will tell them to start using the mid-sized plate, because there's not as much gap on it if you leave something off it. Because if the eye sees that there's a gap on the plate, it starts wondering, what was there that I'm not getting? And by having the mid-sized plate, nothing is actually missing off the plate. The plate doesn't look as if there's something gone.
You don't feel as if you're missing out or losing something.
Well, it's the old story, what the eye see, the heart wants.
Yeah, indeed. And indeed, in terms of the Hypnoband, what the mind can conceive, the mind will achieve.
Nicely put.
Yeah, because it is a virtual, powerful mind technology that you're using there.
It is. And when you go back in years, there was a famous doctor that did an operation. I think it was in Nice. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, where he actually did an operation under hypnosis to remove a person's leg. And if you can, if hypnosis is as powerful as that, then you can do really anything with it. And people used to say to me,
We may have briefly mentioned
"Mhm,
before, Ian, about COVID-19. Well, everybody's talking about
mm,
COVID-19 and the pandemic and et cetera, et cetera. From your experience, what's happening in terms of the work that you do with clients related to COVID?
I have started to see so many couples. It's unbelievable. And
Mm,
really, the cause of this is with the pandemic, and when we were put into the first lockdown, wasn't too bad. The second lockdown was very, very hard for people, especially couples. When you take, for example, a couple who have an apartment, one goes out to work, the other one goes out to work. They don't see each other all day. But all of a sudden, they're thrown together. They can't go out of the apartment. There's nowhere to go in the apartment. And they start to really realize that they're getting on each other's nerves. And
mm.
because
I can well imagine.
they've no communication
No.
from when they're out working. Oh, what did you do in work today? Or how was your job today?
Mm,
They're 24/7 in one spot, and they're
yeah.
literally at each other's throats because they don't
Hmm.
know how to deal with it.
Hmm.
And I teach couples communication skills. I teach couples how to go back on date nights. Even under the COVID, you can still have a date night, and get them to remember how they were when they first met. And as I say, you can do it, but they need to seek help because they just do not know how to cope. They've never been in this situation before.
No, it's something new. It's something it's we often hear the phrase it's a new normality.
Hmm.
But it's a sort of it's not a very nice new
It's
normality,
not.
Ian.
It is not because
Uh-huh.
um, I personally can see it going away very quickly.
Mm,
And the thing is, I think all therapists from all fields are going to have their hands full to help people who are out there. And I could say it's a great time to be a therapist. And I don't mean that in a sarcastic way, but it is, we are here now to help people. And what we are now coming to the forefront to be able to do, because
mhm, mhm.
to be able to help people and get them to where they want to be, couples, single people, families, you know, it's great.
Yeah.
It is
Mhm,
great.
mhm. And if there was one, golden nugget of advice that you could give to someone who may find themselves in that situation, what would it
As a
be?
couple,
Yeah.
communication, believe it or not.
Okay.
Now, I won't just say communication and leave it at that.
Mm.
Before,
Very broad spectrum term in communication.
mhm, when I say
Yeah.
communication, before we used to come in and, because we've been out working or they've been out of their job, they talk about their job or they talk about this or they go out and have a drink or they go out and have a meal. Now is when they come in or when they're even coming in from one room to another room. What have you been doing all day? Instead of
Mm.
saying, how has your day been? Two different ways of asking the same question. And
Yeah.
they are very different because one is confrontational and the other one is being nice about it.
Hmm.
And
Give us that again, Ian. Just say that
no
again,
problem.
please.
For example, asking your partner, how has your day been? Instead of asking them, what have you been doing all day?
Hmm.
Because what have you been doing all day is like being confrontational. Whereas
Okay.
how has your day been is opening up the conversation to kind of say, well, how has things been today for you?
Hmm. Hmm. Excellent. So that's very good advice. So, and it demonstrates the power of, language and the
Mm.
use of language
Very
and how we
important.
communicate.
Very important.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
always stop to think, especially nowadays, is you wanted one nugget, I'll give you another one. Is very
Mm,
simply because people are thrown together, think before what you say. And the
mm.
old
Yeah.
um,
I love it. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
old thing of saying, put your mouth in gear or put your brain in gear before you put your mouth into action is comes
Mm-hmm.
to the forefront because if you
Mm,
say something that can be confrontational, straight away it's gone into an argument. The last
yeah.
thing you want,
Yeah.
especially when you're just thrown together in this situation, is to have an argument. Now, people are going to have disagreements, but the thing is, think about what you're going to say before you say it. And nine
Mm-hmm.
times out of 10, if you do that, you're not going to have an argument.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Now, and there's also the saying, you have two ears and one mouth for a reason.
Very true.
In terms of the importance of listening, Ian.
Yes, it's so important that we listen to each
Mm,
other. And
mm,
the other way of doing it is if you do feel like you are going to have a disagreement or an argument, is don't interrupt your partner when they're talking.
mhm.
Imagine their head as a red balloon, filling up, filling up, filling up, filling up all the way. And when you see it deflating, that's when the time to go back and be responsive to them.
Mm,
Because
mhm.
if you interrupt somebody when they're kind of up on their high horse or whatever, it's going to turn into an argument because you're not giving them a second to answer, or you're not giving them a second to get their opinion over. Let people,
Mhm.
we're all different. Every single one of
Yeah.
us are different. So therefore, you've got to give each other a chance to be able to get used to each other. And this is a new thing that's happening. We are only getting used to each other now.
Mm,
And if you can, as I say, go
yeah.
back and imagine two people, one out of work all day, the other one out of work all day, the only time they see each other is at mealtime or in an evening or at a weekend. Look at all those hours that they didn't know each other, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
they're being thrown together, and they're certainly not learning to get to know each other very quickly. And it brings out
Mhm.
the exact same thing as saying, if you want to know me, come and live with me.
Yeah. And all of that situation and all of the circumstances as a result of COVID, and not necessarily as a result of COVID, it could be other things that are
Of
happening in
course, of
people's
course.
lives. All of that leads to, if dare I use the word, stress.
Hmm.
So how do you deal with stress, Ian? What
Well,
what's happening? What do we do when we're
we're
stressed?
all at times get stressed, and as we know, there's two types of stress: good stress and bad stress. The good stress, for
Hmm.
example, is when you're walking across the road and the mind gets you to look left and right to make sure that nothing's coming so that you don't get knocked down. That's good stress, and it's important that we have that. But when that good stress turns bad, it's giving us the feeling of maybe impending doom, or not feeling the way we want to feel, or feeling anxious. And, to deal with that, you have to get, in my opinion, to what is the root cause of it. This is going back
Hmm.
to hypnotherapy again,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
in hypnotherapy, we do what's called analytical therapy. And
Mm.
analytical therapy gets to the root cause of the problem, it
Okay.
compartmentalizes it into its right places, and then you're able to move on.
Hmm.
And,
Ian, some, like, if may
yeah,
interrupt, some may say that, analytical hypnotherapy or
mhm,
analysis, that you, you run the risk of re-traumatizing the person again.
Well, it depends. When you say re-traumatizing the person, if a person's already traumatized, you're not really re-traumatizing them. Because
Okay.
the thing is, no matter what therapy you do, you can't just put a band-aid on it and expect it to heal itself. You got to be able to rip off the band-aid and deal with the problem in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Where, yet again, a lot of other therapies don't. They just brush the outside of it and put the band-aid on. Whereas the analysis or analytical therapy, for example, if a person has had a childhood trauma, you can go back and sort out the childhood trauma. You can go back and help them and help what's called the inner child to work with
Mm-hmm.
them
Yeah.
and be able to
Yeah.
put that trauma away.
Mm-hmm. I suppose, Ian, what I'm really getting at is that, for anyone who is listening to us who may have had a trauma
Mhm.
in the past, that should they be afraid to go to a hypnotherapist, a qualified hypnotherapist, professional hypnotherapist, to sort this out?
Absolutely not. And the
Mm.
reason, yet again, is because hypnotherapy is one of the only ones that when from day one you learn how to relax. And I say to my clients, if nothing else, the worst thing that you're going to learn is how to relax.
Mm-hmm.
And the if you're dealing with the trauma, and we deal with all sorts of traumas, and from sexual abuse to rape to everything that you know you've got to be able to get the person to relax into it so that they can deal with it. Because if they don't deal with it, it's going to keep on recurring.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
nobody wants these recurring problems all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what I'm getting from you, Ian, is that, if anyone has a traumatic past, or a specific incident that was traumatic, that by using the power of hypnotherapy and hypnosis,
Hmm.
that, as you mentioned, you can compartmentalize
Yes,
this.
yes. And a lot of people, they've got to realize as well is that years ago, people used to think of hypnosis or hypnotherapy as making people look silly. And
Yeah.
the one thing that we do not do under any circumstances is make people look silly or do
Mm-hmm.
anything against their will. In actual fact, you cannot really do anything against anybody's will because the mind won't allow them. For example, if you ask them
Mm.
what their bank balance is or their bank account number, they're not going to tell you because it's nothing to do with the therapy in the first place.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because of the hypnosis, you can deal with so many things from nail biting to giving up smoking to being more confident, have more self esteem, to be able to stand up in front of a whole business forum and talk, whereas you weren't able to do that before because of self confidence. And this is where hypnosis opens up the whole sphere of being able to help your own mind. And whatever your own mind's problems are, can be helped with hypnotherapy or hypnosis.
Wonderful. Now, in terms of the stress aspect
Hmm.
of, we're all stressed to a certain
Of
extent.
course.
Again, we're talking about little golden nuggets of advice that we could give to anyone listening in
Hmm.
terms of de-stressing, or to be enable us to cope a little bit better. What would you say to anyone out there?
What I would say to anybody out there that's suffering with stress is seek help. That is, first aid, first help. And seek help by going to a therapist and explaining to the therapist what the story is and let the therapist help you. Or indeed, if you feel more comfortable talking to a family member, that's fine. But the only problem is when you're talking to a family member, it doesn't necessarily give you the advice that you want because a family member is not going to be objective. So the thing is when you have a person who is a therapist, they have no insight into your family or insight into the problems. So therefore, they're going to give you a view that's going to be of help to you because they're not seeing all the other stuff around it. If that makes sense.
So, in other words, what I'm getting from you is that, the professional therapist gives you a different perspective, or they themselves have a different perspective that enables you to view things from a perspective that enables you to be more calm and comfortable.
Correct.
Perhaps.
And the perspective that you're coming from is a one-to-one with the therapist, and a one-to-one with the client, and you're only dealing with what the client is telling you. You're not, a good therapist listens and hears what a client is not saying.
Yeah, that's interesting. What the client is not saying.
Yes, because many a time a client will tell you what they want to tell you.
Yeah.
But you've got to look in between, like reading in between the lines and
between the gaps.
Exactly. And finding out what is the problems between the gaps. And that's usually where the problems are.
Excellent. Anything else about stress that we should know about, Ian?
We're living in very stressful times. We really are. And people are experiencing stress like they've never experienced it before. A lot of people can handle stress and are able to handle stress, but a lot of people are not able to handle stress. So the thing is, for those people who are not, seek out a good therapist. That is my best advice to them, because no matter what you do, no matter how you do it, the thing is that once you get a therapist that you're comfortable with, a therapist that you can work with, the outcome is absolutely brilliant. Absolutely fantastic for them. And this is going back to what we said in the very beginning, is about lifting that cloud, lifting and seeing that glimmer of hope coming back in to the client's eyes. And actually, you know where the word hope comes from?
Okay,
hope
tell us.
It's an old Russian saying, and it means hope is the last to die. So if you lose hope, you lose everything.
Well, we're not going to die, but we'll keep hoping and have hope to the forefront of our mind.
Exactly. And
now, Ian, so go ahead.
I was going to just say, there is always hope out there for everybody. For everybody. And the thing is, lift up a phone, make a call, and at the end of that first step, you're on your way to recovery.
Wonderful. Now, Ian, before we go, and I want to thank you before we go for this wonderful podcast and for the valuable nuggets of gold and information that you've given us here today. Before we go, how might a prospective client or anyone out there who's interested in finding out more information from you, how can they contact you?
Well, they can do it two ways. One is my mobile number, which is 0872 555 225. That's my own personal number. The other way is through my website, which is www.confidentialcounselling.ie. And there's a lot of information there as well. But as much of the information that you can read on my website, I always say to a client, give me a ring and we can have a chat. And once you have that chat, it's opening up the whole spectrum of helping them.
Wonderful. That was Ian Epstein, a Hypnoband specialist, couples counselling specialist, and a stress specialist. Thank you, Ian Epstein.
You're very welcome, Aidan, and thank you for having me.
You know you want to make positive change in your life, and yet you may not have the know-how. Allow yourself to discover how you too can begin to harness the power of your mind to start that change process now and immediately reap the benefits through ethical hypnotherapy.